Good morning. Nancy, welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to join you here today in our home community on Treaty 5 territory, the traditional territory of the Nishnawasi Cree Nation. I'm thrilled to be here to be part of a critical discussion for us as Northerners. The challenges and the opportunities, but more importantly the challenges that we face when it comes to transportation. I want to acknowledge the many leaders in this room, Minister Lisa Naylor, MLA Eric Redhead. I know our Mayor Colleen Smook is here, Mayor Andre from the PAW is here, a number of leaders from across our region are here, and I want to thank you for being here today. I also want to acknowledge the tireless organizers of this event, Volker Beckman, the entire team at the Thompson Chamber of Commerce, Ethel, and of course the Manitoba Chamber and others who have been critical in making today's and this week's conference a reality. I had the chance to follow some of the news coming out of the discussions yesterday, and of course John with my work was here as well, and I really want to acknowledge the diversity of priorities that you've discussed over the last couple of days, and of course will continue today. I'm very heartened to hear that part of today's discussion also involves feedback, and especially feedback from us that live here, from Northerners, from Northern and Indigenous peoples who face the challenges when it comes to transportation day in and day out. We know that much of the wealth that Manitoba and Canada is built on comes from the north. It comes from the traditional territories, the lands of Indigenous peoples that live here. Whether it's in terms of hydroelectric power, whether it's in terms of mining capacity, whether it's in terms of forestry, the list goes on. But we as Northerners also know that very little of that wealth comes back to our communities. We know that when it comes to standard of living, Northern and Indigenous people, and particularly Indigenous people, face some of the highest levels of poverty and inequality in the country. Unfortunately, I would argue that this didn't just happen. It is the result of policies and approaches that have sought to pull out wealth, but haven't sought to reinvest and partner with the people whose wealth that belongs to. And I would argue that one of the areas where we see the greatest challenges and deficiencies is in the transportation sector. For us, transportation isn't just something to develop and build on, it is a lifeline. And I think today, over the last few days, many of you have heard some of the challenges. Obviously, many of you have shared your expertise in certain areas. And it's clear that there is immense work to be done. I will also share that one of the challenges has been over the last number of years, we have seen a reduction in investment when it comes to transportation in our north. And I'm looking forward to continued investment from our new government here in Manitoba when it comes to the priorities of Northern and Indigenous communities. And I know some critical work has already begun on that front. I want to acknowledge that local leaders have been driving the conversation, and I know Jim and the whole team from the Hudson Bay Route Association have been, have been trailblazers when it comes to a vision for rail transport and building on rail transport that is critical. We need to support that vision. I know many people have been very clear, Volker and others, around the safety of our highways and the need to make sure that we are looking at not just at Highway 6, but upgrading our highways across Northern Manitoba. I know many people have talked about the need to, and certainly as MP for Churchill, I've been clear on the need to build on the Port of Churchill, a gem when it comes to Canada. We call ourselves a proud Arctic and Northern nation, and yet our only deepwater seaport is in rough shape. And we, while obviously the recent significant federal provincial investment is critical, We need to continue to build on that strength. There are key areas when it comes to transportation, and I want to acknowledge challenges in the airline sector, recognizing that costs have gone up, choice has gone down, and we need to make sure that Northern and Indigenous communities have access to affordable, accessible airline transportation. And finally, I would say one of the biggest issues in our region is the devastating impacts of climate change. I think we all have seen a rough summer, whether we live in southern Manitoba or elsewhere, frankly, in Canada, but here in the north, it is very clear that we are in the front lines of the climate emergency. It is unheard of that wildfires would have started as aggressively as they did in early May around Cranberry Bridge. It is unheard of that we have had such dry conditions so early, so persistent. And we know that the rate of wildfires, the aggressive nature of wildfires, as everyone, as experts predicted, are only going to get worse. But that's not the only way we see climate change. Perhaps the most pronounced in terms of the daily lives of people is the lack of, or the shortening of the access of winter roads, or ice roads, as many folks call them. 16 communities across our region depend on ice roads to be able to get in what they need on a year-in, year-out basis. And their reliance on ice roads is becoming more and more tenuous as a result of climate change. And I think it's very important that we look at alternatives to get what we need into communities, and I know that's been part of the discussion here. But it's also very clearly important that we hear from communities, from First Nations directly, who are clear that there need to be all-weather roads now. For communities in our region, all-weather roads are something that is absolutely a priority. And for those of us that know what it means to have a highway in and out of their community, we may not know what it's like to live on the other side. I worked closely with Potawatomi Cree Nation just a couple of weeks ago when it came to the wildfires that almost engulfed their community. A number of people said, if we only had a road, we could get out. When it comes to climate change, when it comes to quality of life, when it comes to dealing with poverty, inequality, inequitable access to critical services like healthcare and education, all-weather roads and all-weather infrastructure is critical in our region. And I would say along with that is making sure that there are airports, and I'm so pleased that there is movement on the Saguenay Airport from the province and from the federal government as well. We have 2 First Nations in Manitoba that still does not have airport access, which is an immense challenge for that community and for our region overall. All to say, this discussion is a critical discussion now, it's a critical discussion at any time, but particularly with the reality of climate change, and particularly given the fact that we as Northerners, that Indigenous and Northern people, are on the front lines and stand to pay the highest price. I'm encouraged by the fact that so many of you in industry, research, on the government side are interested in hearing from us and in supporting us in terms of what needs to be done for our communities, for our region, for our future. At the end of the day, it's Indigenous and Northern voices from Northern communities that need to be driving the conversation, guiding partnerships, guiding investment. And that way, we all will be better off. Very much looking forward to the discussions and, more importantly, the action ahead. Thank you so much. All the best in the deliberations today.